night investigators found something alive in the abandoned hospital. Before the lights go out, tap subscribe, drop a like, and tell me in the comments if you dare to walk these halls alone, because what we found should have stayed buried. The hospital sat on a hill like a dark ship, windows broken, doors chained but hanging. Locals said a fire closed it years ago. They said the place was empty. They were wrong. The air smelled like wet ash and old medicine. The wind pushed the tall grass so it sounded like whispering. My flashlight drew a thin white line across the brick, and dust floated like tiny ghosts in the beam. We came after midnight, when the town was quiet and the sky felt heavy. It was me, Lydia, and Marcos. We were not thrill seekers. We were looking for truth, what really happened in this place and why people still heard voices on the road when no one was there. Lydia kept a small camera clipped to her jacket. Marcos had a thermal scanner he bought secondhand. I carried a recorder, the kind that can hear what the ear often misses. We stepped through a back entrance where the chain had been cut long ago. The door made a slow metal cry as it opened, like the building was warning us. Inside, the floor was a spilled puzzle of tiles. Our footsteps sounded too loud. Hallway signs still hung at odd angles: pediatrics, maternity, ICU. The paint peeled in long, hanging strips like wet paper. In the dark, the strips looked like hands reaching down. I told myself it was only paint. I told myself many small things to stay calm. We reached the nurse's station. Plastic flowers sat in a cracked mug. The petals were dusty and gray, but their shape was still careful, like someone had placed them yesterday. Lydia found a patient bracelet under a pile of folders. The name was smudged, letters blurred into a single word. She slid it back where she found it. "We are not taking anything," she said. Her voice sounded thin. Marcos set the thermal scanner on the counter, and the screen flashed to life. Cool blues, ghostly greens, a few yellow smudges where our bodies warmed the air. Then a draft moved down the corridor, slow and steady, not like wind. It felt like breath. My light trembled across a door with a warning label: "Authorized personnel only." The door was scorched black around the edges, as if the fire had tried to eat it and gave up. My fingers shook when I pushed it. The hinges resisted, then accepted. Beyond it was the surgical wing, long and empty. Operating lamps hung like silver moons, frozen over tables that were streaked with rust. Cabinets were cracked open, glass broken, small bottles inside with labels curling off. It felt like a place that had stopped in the middle of a sentence and never finished. We set the recorder on a metal tray and stood still. "If anyone is here," I said, "we came to listen." My words echoed through rooms we couldn't see. The recorder light blinked red. It blinked in a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat. A faint tap came from the far end of the hall. 1, 2, pause. 1, 2, 3. Marcos checked the scanner. On the screen, a soft shape gathered near an open door, colder than the rest of the hall, like a pocket of winter in the middle of summer. He swallowed. "Do you see that?" he whispered. Lydia lifted her camera. The lens caught a brief sparkle in the dark, a reflection from something small and round on the floor. She moved closer and found a child's marble, clear with a blue swirl inside. She nudged it, and it rolled toward us, slow and steady, as if guided by a hand we could not see. I tried to laugh, but the sound came out wrong. "Old buildings shift," I said. "Floors tilt." But the marble changed direction in front of us, turned left, and stopped at the foot of a door marked Recovery Room 3. Lydia pressed her ear to the wood. "There's a sound," she said. "Like someone breathing." We all leaned in. The sound was small and careful, the way a person breathes when they're trying not to be heard. My skin prickled. Marcos whispered, "This place has no power. The vents are dead. That sound is not air." I reached for the handle. It was cold, then warm, as if someone had just let go from the other side. I turned it. The door opened a finger's width, then a hand pushed it wide from inside, pale, slim, and gone in a blink. Lydia gasped. I swung my flashlight through the gap. The room was empty. Only the curtains moved, slow and soft, like something had just walked past and the fabric remembered. The marble rolled across the threshold and stopped at the far wall, like the end of a line. My recorder clicked twice on the tray. The red light froze. A voice came out of it, clear and close, not a whisper but a statement, like a nurse reading a chart. 3 returned, the voice said. 2 may leave. The hall went silent. Somewhere deep in the hospital, a second recorder clicked back. We hadn't placed a second recorder. Then the operating lamps above us flickered on, powerless, dead for years, glowing just long enough to show our faces to whatever was watching. And in that instant, the hospital took a breath. The lights died again, leaving us in thick blackness. You could hear the hum of the world disappear, replaced by the building's heartbeat. Old pipes knocking faintly somewhere below, water whispering through unseen cracks. Lydia's camera light snapped on, thin and shaky. Marcos was frozen, staring at the door that had moved on its own. No one spoke for a long time. Then Lydia said, "Play it again." Her voice trembled, but she needed to hear it, to prove it was real. I rewound the recorder. Static filled the hall. Then beneath the hiss came the voice again. Soft, measured, female. 3 returned. 2 may leave. Could it be feedback? Marcos asked, but his tone was already defeated. Feedback doesn't talk, Lydia said. We backed away from the door, moving toward the main corridor. Every step echoed too many times, as if someone else walked behind us but just a little out of sync. My flashlight flickered, cutting quick pictures from the dark. A wheelchair tipped over, a cracked clock stuck at 3:07, a child's drawing taped to the wall. Stick figures in hospital gowns, standing beneath something that looked like smoke. We reached the elevator bay. The doors were open, showing a shaft filled with nothing but shadows. I aimed the light down, expecting only dust, but the beam caught movement, something pale and round drifting slowly upward. It was a balloon. A white balloon rising without wind. It stopped at the lip of the shaft and pressed gently against the air, like an unseen hand was holding it there. Lydia took a slow step back. "We need to go," she whispered. But Marcos was staring past her, toward the far end of the corridor. "There," he said, pointing. For a second I thought he was seeing another reflection. But no, this was something solid. A woman stood there in a faded hospital gown, her head tilted slightly as if she was listening to a sound we couldn't hear. Her skin was almost translucent in the faint light, her hair flat and colorless. And her feet weren't touching the floor. I blinked and she was gone. The camera light caught only a drifting mist, curling into the doorway of an old patient ward. Marcos ran toward it. "Wait," Lydia called, but he was already inside. The ward smelled like burned plastic and rain. Rows of empty beds faced the windows, where lightning flashed in thin, faraway lines. The air was colder here, biting cold like the air inside a freezer. Marcos's scanner whined, its display covered in waves of blue. "There's energy everywhere," he said. "It's like..." He stopped. The scanner showed 3 shapes standing among us. 1 for each of us. But behind them, faint and flickering, were 2 more. I turned in a slow circle. Nothing. Lydia whispered, 5. "What?" 3 returned. 2 may leave. I felt it then, the realization sinking like ice. Whatever had spoken wasn't warning us. It was counting us. A loud clang echoed from behind. The metal door we came through slammed shut, rattling against its hinges. Marcos yanked at the handle. It wouldn't move. "It's jammed," he shouted. Lydia aimed her camera toward the back of the room. "There's another exit," she said. The lens flickered, static washed across the screen, and for a heartbeat the image on the camera showed us, but not as we were. In the playback we looked gray, hollow, like the life had been drained from our faces. And standing behind us, perfectly clear, was the woman in the gown. Her eyes were black circles, wide and endless. The lights overhead sparked to life again, one by one, stretching down the hallway like a trail. "She wants us to follow," Lydia said. Marcos shook his head. No, this is wrong." But the hallway beyond the ward was glowing softly, and from somewhere deep inside, we heard the faint sound of a lullaby. A music box. We followed the sound because silence was worse. Each step felt heavier than the last. The walls looked different now, names carved into the paint, hundreds of them, like signatures of people who had once been here and never left. The music led us to a nursery room. Tiny beds lined the wall, each covered in sheets turned yellow with age. In the middle of the floor sat a small music box turning slowly by itself, playing a tune that didn't belong in a place like this. Lydia crouched beside it. "It's new," she said. "Look, no dust." Marcos backed toward the door. "We need to leave. Now." I was about to agree when the box stopped mid-song. The silence that followed was absolute, thick enough to feel. Then, from the bed nearest to us, came a quiet creak, as if something small had shifted under the sheets. The blanket rose an inch. Then 2. Then the shape beneath it sat up. Lydia screamed. The camera hit the floor. Marcos lunged forward, grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the door. But before we could reach it, the door slammed shut, locking us in. The music box began again on its own. Only now the tune was slower. And outside the window where lightning flashed, a dozen faces stared back, pale, childlike and waiting. The storm outside had turned violent, rain hammering against the glass like 1,000 fists. The room was trembling, the ceiling lights flickering weakly as if they too were afraid. The nursery door wouldn't open no matter how hard we pulled. The children's faces outside the window were still there, not angry, not sad, just watching. Lydia was sobbing quietly, whispering prayers under her breath. Marcos slammed his shoulder against the door again. "It's locked from the outside," he shouted. I knelt, fumbling with my recorder, hoping maybe, somehow, we could capture what was happening, proof that we weren't losing our minds. The red light blinked to life. For a few seconds, all it picked up was static and our panicked breathing. Then the same calm voice as before came through, clear as day. 3 returned. 1 may leave. Lydia froze. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No, no, no." The music box stopped. Every sound in the hospital died with it. Then came the slow creak of metal, beds shifting, wheels squeaking, one by one turning toward us. I felt something brush against my ankle. When I looked down, there were small handprints forming in the dust, circling my feet like ripples in water. Marcos picked up the fallen camera and pointed it around the room. The lens flickered through static, showing flashes of movement. A small shape standing by the far wall, another crouched under a bed. They were children, dozens of them, pale as smoke, faces blurred like fogged glass. Their eyes glowed faintly white in the darkness. "They're trapped," Lydia said softly. "They never left." The walls began to shake. One of the beds rolled forward on its own, stopping just inches from me. On the sheet lay an old hospital chart, brittle, yellow, barely readable. The patient's name matched the one on the bracelet Lydia had found earlier. The date of death was August 13, 1982, the day of the hospital fire. And under cause of death, it said, smoke inhalation. Body not recovered. Lydia whispered, "They died in here." I turned toward her, but she was no longer looking at me. Her gaze was locked on the far wall. The paint was bubbling, blistering, as if heat were building from behind it. A black outline began to appear, the shape of a door. "Exit," Marcos said, breathless. "It's giving us an exit." He rushed forward, tearing at the loose paint. Beneath it was a narrow passage, dark but real. I shone the flashlight inside. It led down a set of stairs, old and cracked, disappearing into pitch black. "Go," Lydia shouted. "Before it closes." We stumbled down, the air growing colder with each step. The sound of the music box followed us, echoing through the stairwell even though we'd left it behind. At the bottom was a corridor filled with file cabinets and broken equipment. A faint blue glow pulsed at the far end, a small generator, half submerged in water, humming faintly though it shouldn't have had power. The light revealed dozens of patient files scattered across the floor, soaked and decayed. I picked one up. The ink was faded, but the handwriting was clear. Room 3, containment. Then Lydia screamed. I spun around just in time to see her dragged backward into the shadows, her hands clawing the air before vanishing completely. The sound that followed wasn't human, a mix between a child's cry and something metallic grinding against itself. "Lydia!" I shouted, but she was gone. Marcos grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the light. "We have to move." We ran, splashing through the water. The walls were closing in, groaning like the whole hospital was alive. Behind us, voices rose, not screams, not words, just the broken sound of children crying for help. We reached a door marked morgue. It was half open, the light inside flickering. Marcos pushed through first. The moment we entered, the door slammed shut. Inside, the room was empty except for a single metal table. On it sat my recorder, still blinking red. But it wasn't where I had left it. It was playing. From the speaker came Lydia's voice. "Come, slow. They're not trapped," she said. "We are." Then her voice shifted, lower, hollow, as if 100 others were speaking through her. 3 returned. None may leave. The generator light dimmed to black. Marcos screamed as the table shook violently, metal scraping the floor. The last thing I remember was the sound of glass shattering and a cold hand grabbing my wrist. When I woke up, it was daylight. The hospital was silent, empty. My flashlight was dead. My phone said it was 2 days later. The police found only one camera, mine. The footage ended with the nursery scene. Lydia and Marcos were never found. I tried to tell them what happened. They said I imagined it. But last night, when I played back my recorder again, I heard it one final time. A soft voice, whispering right beside the microphone. "Welcome back. 3 returned."